Hi, I'm Edward Funk, and this is podcast number 61, titled Loretta Young and Clark Gable, A Complex, Messy, Confusing Relationship. And this information is coming from this book, Behind the Door, The Real Story of Loretta Young, by me, Edward Funk. And it's a paper book, an audiobook, and a ebook. So anyway, listen, enjoy, but keep in mind it's copywritten. Okay. For this podcast, I'm going to step out of the straight-telling narrative of actress Loretta Young's life and discuss how I came to approach the part of her life regarding her daughter Judy. To do so, I have to go back to December 2011. Okay. During that month, I received several forwarded articles, both in print and electronic, including one from the London Telegraph. All informed me of Judy Lewis's death. The headings came down to this: Hollywood's secret baby dies. They detailed how Judy was the progeny of a married 34-year-old Clark Gable and his 22-year-old co-star of Call of the Wild, Loretta Young. In November 1935, their daughter was born in secret and in time adopted by her then single biological mother. Judy was an adult before she knew that Loretta and Clark Gable were her biological parents. I had worked with Loretta Young on her biography throughout the last years of her life. I can attest that the above facts are true. Now, several other items written in Judy's 1994 book, Uncommon Knowledge, were of questionable accuracy. A prominent feature of Judy's book and her subsequent interviews on TV was a 2-hour visit she had with her father at her home when she was 15. According to this account, Loretta had initially been in the room, but soon faded away, leaving Judy and Gable alone. Judy didn't understand why Clark Gable was visiting with her and why he was treating her so tenderly. She recalls that as he was leaving, he cupped her chin and kissed her on the forehead. According to Loretta, this visit never occurred. In the last 10 years of her life, Loretta's life, the years that I knew her, I never called her in a lie. There were times she was mistaken, but that's something different. And believe me, anything associated with Clark Gable and Judy, she would have remembered. Loretta also challenged a quote in Judy's book as untrue, in which she allegedly said, "Clark offered to divorce his wife and marry me, and I said no. It was the biggest mistake of my life." After I read the articles about Judy dying, I called Judy's half-brother, Christopher Lewis. We talked for an hour and a half, and during that time, we discussed Judy and her book. I mentioned to Chris that as I was leaving his mom's funeral, I approached Judy and said, "Let's have lunch. I think I can fill you in on some of your missing history." Her response was, "Well, maybe." Chris's take was that Judy didn't want any facts to get in the way of her narrative. As he put it, Judy's always lived in Judy's world. I hung up and thought, the real story needs to be told. The story of Clark Gable and Loretta having a beautiful love affair, ending with Loretta's pregnancy, is a gross simplification of what was, in fact, a complex, messy, confusing relationship that can only be understood in the context of its time and place. Loretta could have told a very different story. She chose not to. I could, and with this book, intend to. Our original book was never published, mainly because Loretta refused to discuss the Clark Gable-Judy saga. At one point, she did allow me to go to her sisters and get the story from them. Other times, she would drop her guard and share insights from her perspective. Now, this is the story of many perspectives. Loretta not only encouraged her sisters and brothers to talk with me, but also her sons, Christopher and Peter. She also asked her two closest friends, Josie Wayne, John Wayne's first wife, who we've encountered in several past podcasts, and Jane Mullen Sharp, another friend who went back to Loretta's childhood. But mainly, we rehistory Loretta Young's voice. And if this book reads like a story told over time, well, it was. As I mentioned earlier, I knew Loretta well for the last 10 years of her life. Loretta told me I was free to tell as much as I knew of the Clark Gable Judy saga when she died. I have not, because my own life has gone in a different direction, and the notes, tapes, earlier manuscripts regarding Loretta have been sitting in boxes in my garage for more than a decade and a half. There was another reason for my reluctance. When I participated in the 1989 A&E biography, Loretta Young, Hollywood's Heavenly Beauty, I questioned how they were handling the Clark-Judy saga. A staff member replied, "Every child deserves to think they were conceived in love." I asked myself, even if it's not true? Still, it made me ponder, and I became hesitant to push a story that I knew would be very painful to Judy Lewis. In the intervening years, I have reflected on Loretta's life and concluded a man other than Gable was much more influential. The slamming of a door when she was age 4 set the template for Loretta's relationship with men for the rest of her life. Her dad, John Earl Young, walked out, climbed on his motorcycle, and was never seen by his wife and children again. Loretta vaguely remembered seeing her dad ride off, but didn't know if that was a particular day. It probably was. Why else would it have made an impression? In previous podcasts, I realized that her dad leaving at such a young age affected her deeply. It might possibly have been the reason why she wouldn't play roles in which the audience wouldn't like her. Loretta didn't like to think about her dad, and particularly didn't like the idea that his leaving may have changed her life in one way or another. But it did. She would spend the rest of her life seeking the approval of others, women one way, men another. The male conquest came easily, as she quickly grew into a beauty that was hard to resist. But for reasons she chose not to contemplate, the men she invited into her life couldn't or wouldn't stay, just like her dad. She didn't contemplate such issues because she viewed personal introspection as self-indulgent, and she had better things to do. Indeed, as a glamorous star of Hollywood's golden era and a pioneer of the early days of television, she did a great deal. Loretta exhibited an interesting dichotomy. The fact that, I actually heard her say late in life, "I can't stand someone not liking me. It cuts me to the quick." But that didn't stop her from being a star who struck fear in the hearts of studios, producers, and directors. She was dubbed both Still Magnolia and a chocolate-covered butterfly. The source of the latter, according to Loretta, was Betty Davis, hardly a shrinking Violet herself. There's an explanation of how and why these two sides of Loretta came to be, actually how they melded together, but that would also be getting ahead of the story. In just a few paragraphs, I've shared my psychological overview of Loretta, and as I compiled this final manuscript, I reread the words of the first-hand participants. I realized that the story really tells itself. Consequently, I've eliminated much of my own voice so that the reader can draw their own conclusions. Though Loretta's relationship with Clark Gable was not the pivotal point of her life, it did have lasting influence, both personally and professionally. So let's begin with him. Thank you.